I wanted to talk to you today as part of understanding the path of stillness, what influences us to create our own reality. And in understanding that, how we can come to the path of stillness, which is ideally the path of love. Now, I first started searching decades ago for greater meaning to this life, understanding that the beauty of the religion that I'd followed so far wasn't quite cutting it. It was too rule-based, too dogmatic, and it didn't allow that freedom of expression that understanding creation really does. And I want to make that really contemporary and quite normal for us. So I spent decades searching spiritually through different modems, through sacred geometry and the flower of life and the Merkaba, through Reiki, through shamanism, through a sheer love of spirit and a connection, a deep connection I have with the Holy Spirit or Jesus that I've had all my life since I was tiny. But just about 3.5 years ago, when my son completed suicide, my idea of reality exploded like an atom bomb. I was just absolutely devastated, empty, almost non-existent. And strangely enough, in February of the August in 2022, when Anthony transitioned, I had bought A Course in Miracles, and it's quite a heavy tome. But that doesn't really worry me because I've been reading the Bible most of my life, and I love researching anyway. It's my joy. So I got this big, heavy Course in Miracles. I'll show it to you. It's it's huge. It's well thumbed, and it gave me structure at that time, although that's not why it was written. But because I was already questioning what is life about, because my son had suddenly departed this life, and then I wanted to come connect to him in spirit, I began to read earnestly. I also began to read every spiritual book going. So, A Course in Miracles was written by two psychologists in America. And the first time Helen Schumann, one of the psychologists, channeled Jesus was in 1965, and she heard this voice in her head. I get that voice constantly, but I didn't get all the teachings that Helen got by any means. And so she and William Thetford um, took the dictation, edited it, and published it in 1976. And since then, there has been another channeling of Jesus in the way of mastery. So the style of the Course in Miracles is written for the understanding of the collective around the 70s and 80s, post the dogma of religion, post flower power, post the freedom of the pill, and in the atomic era of life. And when life was becoming more materialistic. So we were almost leaving the spiritual side behind and moving towards a material world, which we are still in. And so we were given this opportunity, this hope to help us to see how we were creating our reality. So the whole idea of A Course in Miracles is to help us to see the perception that we create from this separate reality we think we're in. And I remember at the time trying to deal with unraveling of my belief systems and manage my grief at the same time. And so some of the early lessons, which are really simple and clear, were good. They were pointing me in the right direction. But I was getting hung up later on because I was so attached to the idea of family and to the idea of my son, obviously, and my daughter and grandchildren. And I was finding that part difficult to come to terms with, but I'll share that later on. So the first course, lesson one, is says nothing I see in this world room means anything. It starts quite clearly with something plain and simple as what you can see around. And we don't analyze that. So I would be saying nothing I see in this room around me, and I would look at the computer and the microphone and the view from the window and the things around my little office. And I would be saying, using my mind, nothing I see is real. And that is kind of setting us off on the understanding that we base our perceptions on fear from the ego. And I know I have explored ego before, and I have met some resistance from people listening. And that's okay, because the resistance is a threshold, it's a doorway to finding new meaning in our life. And so the ego is the thought system, the belief system that we make up. And we make it up from a defense and from a value that we give to something. But I'll talk about that later on, because this first lesson is just introducing nothing I see means anything. And then the second lesson, I have given everything I see all the meaning for me. This is a truly brilliant lesson. I am the source of all the meaning I see. Me. I first met that when I was studying three principles in 2012. And I suddenly realized that I had made me up. And it made me chuckle because it was hard work trying to live up to the me I had made up. I was this brilliant leader, this perfect person, this be all and end all to everyone, the fixer, the doer, the coper. It was exhausting. I don't know if you're like that in your life and if you hear beyond that. But I think the Course in Miracles is asking us to show up with the mind like a child, an open mind and an open heart, and to really hear that little voice that isn't God, that's ego driven, that sort of criticize, a bit like a critical parent or a judge. I imagine mine in a little white coat, a lab coat, and I sort of have to push him off my shoulder. I don't want to hurt him, and he's made up anyway, but I want to move him out of the way. So resistance is the ego's belief in separation. And so our perception, the way we see things. Now, the joy of my working in school, and maybe that's what helped me to see life differently, because I work with young children, and so I lived in that make-believe world an awful lot. The joy of that is that you can see how children don't filter everything through as many beliefs as we do. They are quicker to let go of something. If they're in a belief that you've got my toy, that's mine, even though it belongs to school, and they pull and tug over it, and usually find another toy that they like even more. So they let go of the first toy. The trouble is with us, we've got an idea that we have resistance over, or a person or a circumstance, and we don't let go of it. We pile more and more thinking on top of it. And our focus is through that interpretation. And it's the interpretation of what we are seeing that creates our world. It's wonderful, really, what we do to ourselves as human, or not wonderful. And I can laugh because I've been through the darkest, worst times of my life. And I am so glad I've moved beyond the pain and suffering of my perception. It doesn't mean I've moved beyond my grief or my feeling of loss for my son. No, but it means I'm not stuck in my interpretation of that loss, my perception of that loss, because everything's filtered through my beliefs. And like you, we learn those beliefs growing up through our parents, our teachers, our co-workers. And when we interpret this, we project it out into the world. So our world is what we create in our mind. But it looks real, doesn't it? It's your own mind reflected back to you. Imagine that. That's why some days it looks fabulous and other days you wish you'd never got out of bed. Or is that just me? But the great thing is, if we are creating it with the mind, we can unravel it with the mind. And that's what A Course in Miracles is about. It's about that unraveling of the thought system. And that can be in an instant. So if I am all, or I am the source of all the meaning I see, then there's nothing that's inherently good or bad until I give it meaning. Everything's neutral. So that's really good because if I fall out with somebody, which I rarely do these days, but if you do have a disagreement with someone, you're not trying to change the other person, you look within yourself. That's back to the path of stillness. And so making a distinction between the real world, the God created, the source created, the spirit created, whatever name you want to give to that universal energy, and that's made up, the name's made up too. But the distinction between the constant eternal wholeness of what spirit creates and the dumbfounded nonsense that we create, that's changing, that's transitional, that fluctuates, that if you look in that direction, you don't know how to work it out. And lesson 3 says, I do not understand anything I see. Isn't that true? Haven't we all been in that space? The understanding I have is all based on this moving perception. But there is one thing I'd like to say as we moved from lesson 1 to lesson 2. Lesson 1, nothing I see means anything. And then lesson 2, I've given everything I see all the meaning for me. To lesson 3, I do not understand anything I see in this room, in this street, in this house, etc. And I really want to say that we can't learn something new if we're hanging on to the old belief system. What does that mean, Annie? It means if I am reading, I do not understand anything I see in this room, and I'm looking at a chair, a desk, a cup. That's all I'm doing in the moment in order to unravel. I don't want to give it any meaning. I don't want to listen to the voice in my head that's saying, are you sure about that? Pick it up, it's real. It's my interpretation and perception of it that's not real. The real understanding is knowing truth. And the joy, because I've been through this for 3 years in a row, the joy is when you feel the truth of a situation and you accept it. And accepting it doesn't mean something passive. It sometimes means taking action. So perception is interpretation, is misunderstanding. That's a relief. we can't actually see through our body's eyes because we're not a separate self. And so how can we see ourselves? And understanding that might take a bit longer, and I'm not really going to go into that. Let me take a tree. So your interpretation of a tree and my interpretation of a tree might be completely different and will be different. You know, if I took a whole class of children out into a forest, which I did a lot, and I asked them to draw a tree, they'd all see it completely differently. And we know that because sometimes things around us can disappear, can't they? You know, I can lose a pen from my desk. I can lose my phone every 5 minutes. And it's there in front of me, and yet I can't see it for some reason. But when I pause and I get really clear, empty, down into the heart, just by following my breath, then I can let go of my belief in that moment and the thing reappears. And it sometimes reappears without me doing that. So recognizing the difference between my perception, my belief systems, and the knowledge that is real and true by spirit. This is only the beginning. This is the foundation work of the Course in Miracles. And it's only the third day, and there are 362 more days to go. So if you're not getting it in these first 3 lessons, don't worry. Join the club. I'm in the 4th year of doing this, and I still fabulously see where my misinterpretation is, where I think something is absolutely concrete and true and real, and then I realize it isn't. You know, if you think about your bank balance in January, after all that Christmas spending, if you do celebrate Christmas, or maybe your bank balance when you get a huge car bill in or something like that, and they're only numbers, but you go, and if you have a sudden influx of money, you go, ooh, and yet they're only numbers. It's the interpretation, isn't it? And if that example of a bank balance is creating a charge in you, put it to one side, go back to the tree. I know at the beginning, some of the later understanding really charged me in my grief space. But I think as we go along, we'll understand that resistance and that feeling of defensiveness that we've been taught via the ego belief system, that fear-based system, that competitive desire to be successful and have more and more and more. You know, it's part of the human experience sometimes. I know I was very competitive. I still am. It sort of hooks me in, and I have to remember that that's my perception, even in games, you know, a card game or a board game. And the good thing is my family laugh at me, and in that laughter, I see, that's a gift, I see I have fallen into my ego thinking. And that's okay, because the I am part of me that I talked about, and I have talked about a lot in my blogs and in the Path of Stillness course, the I am part of me is always there. So I am competitive. The competitive part is made up. The I am part is true. Come and join me in the Path of Stillness. Come and visit my website, www.anniepoole.com. That's ANNIPOOLE, anniepoole.com. See you there.